Now being the time for the regular meeting of the Board of Directors of the Vallecitos Water District, Wednesday, October 16th at 5 o'clock. Pledge of Allegiance, I think I'd like to have someone different. Rondi, our Administrative Service Director, I believe? Manager.
Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Excellent job, Rondi. Roll call, if we hit all electronic buttons, please. Roll call taken.
Thank you.
One absentee. Okay, I need a motion to adopt the agenda for the regular board meeting of October 16th.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Public comment. I do have one for public comment. Ms. Tunsacker.
Mike Hunsaker, 115 Equestrian Court, San Marcos, speaking as president of the Twin Oaks Valley Property Owners Association. There's a small, really small town in Placer County, which was of interest greatly on Prop 218. It was decided, this case, about a year ago. And a small miners camp sued the public water utility under Prop 218. And what had happened was that 8 cabins were on a single water meter. And the city decided, hey, you've got to pay fees and water for each of these cabins as they're going along. And the miners' camp, which owned these cabins, sued, and they prevailed. And one of the issues was these are, quote, phantom meters that they were being charged for. And that the use of phantom meters violates Prop 218. So they had to, the utility had to reduce the fees, and they had to do restitution on the fees. But one of the major factors is that the court says you have to have a physical meter. And right now, you are giving a great deal of leeway to high-density apartment developments. And you're saying, well, we may have more consumption than we originally planned, so we'll charge them extra. Now, the court case also indicated that the use of EDUs, equivalent dwelling units, was inappropriate. This would seem to be a real problem, especially since you've just passed a new ordinance on capacity fees, and you're talking about the use of EDUs and essentially phantom meters. Seems that the only way that is fair is that...
Ms. Tunsacker,
Yeah,
finish your thought. Thank you.
okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Notice to the public. All matters listed on the consent calendar will be voted upon by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a board member or member of the public requested a particular item be removed from the consent calendar, in which case it will be considered separately. And I'm going to remove item 1.4. So I need a motion for the rest of the consent calendar.
Move to approve. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous? Now, 1.4, adoption of resolution ordering the annexation of certain property designated as the Jesus annexation. This is going to require a formal vote. So when we get us the board up, we'll formally vote on this item. We all voted? All yes, 4 yeses, one not here. Thank you very much. All right, that's end.
You're good.
You're done.
Thank you very much.
Have a great day. Keep that beautiful smile.
Thank you.
And the consent calendar. Action items. We have one speaker. We have one speaker, but 2.1, Senate Bill 555 by Senator Lois Walk. D. Davis.
Yeah, so Senate Bill 555 requires agencies to prepare a water loss report, and what you're going to hear tonight is a summary of that report from Mr. Robbins.
Thank you, President Martin and board members. Good afternoon. I'm here to report on our annual water loss submittal. As mentioned, was brought forth by Senator Lois Wolk. California, the Senate bill and the water code require water agencies, urban water suppliers such as Vallecitos to provide a completed and also validated water audit annually to the Department of Water Resources starting in October 2017. And there's been previous reports on this brought before the board. Initially, the California-Nevada section of the AWWA worked together to create a task force, led some stakeholders, brought them together to create the California Water Loss Collaborative. And that group, in turn, created the Water Loss Technical Assistance Program, or TAP, a lot of meetings, a lot of sessions, explaining to staff how water agencies should look at their water and their water usage and their water loss. Vallecitos, the TAP recommends you put together a team. It includes staff from conservation, myself, supply and operations, Ed Pedrazi, our operations manager, billing and finance, which is principal financial analyst Mike Arthur, and then engineering and senior engineer Rob Shaw was the staff person from engineering. There's a lot of water loss terminology that goes with these types of actions. Words like apparent losses and real losses. Apparent losses occur and are included in revenue generating water appears as a loss due to unauthorized use or a calculation error. And then real losses, as you can see in the graphic, much more apparent, water that's actually moving out of the system. This is a really good graphic to show all the different names for water that went into the system, water that goes out of the system, the authorized consumption, the water losses, and so forth. The one thing that I really don't like about it is in the far right, all those rows are about the same size, and the numeric values are not the same size. It's just text. So we do not have the same amount of unbilled metered consumption as we do have billed meter consumption. But it just represents how the water is basically divvied up. So the good thing on our validated results, the water supplied, so water into the system, 15,661.5 acre feet. The amount of authorized consumption, essentially, billed metered, 14,984.7 acre feet. Water losses of 676.8 acre feet, and then non-revenue water of 780.2 acre feet. And Rob served as our validator. So Rob had to go through specific training to become an authorized validator. So Mike puts together a lot of the data. Ed gets a lot of the information from the other agencies and so forth about water coming into the system and water going out of the system. And then Rob validates all of it. We got a water a validity score of 70. That's what the typical ranges are, between 50 and 70. I want to point out, you don't think of this like grading on a, like at school where you'd hope to get 100%. It would almost be impossible to get a rating of 100. Just want to make sure that's pointed out.
I guess what you're saying is, we self-validate, Rob does it, and we got the best validation possible.
Well, we have room for improvement. I'm going to talk about that. So at some point, we expect DWR to come
Rob, good
down
job.
on water agencies to improve their water audit validity score. And when DWR makes that push to say you need to improve at some point, it's recommended that we implement a customer meeting and testing program and actually pull meters out and test them and make sure they're accurate. And that's probably the best thing we can do to improve the score, and recommend that we wait till DWR tell us how much we need to improve before implementing that, as that would be the low-hanging fruit, so to speak. This is an annual process. We're going to be doing this every year. We do this every year. It gets submitted in October. And at some point, it's expected that there'll be a standard for the water loss, and it'll be established through a process via DWR and may be expressed as a volume per capita or volume per connection. And they will probably account for relevant factors such as, the infrastructure age and condition and how long the pipes have been in service and so forth. So that concludes my presentation, and your water audit team is here to take questions.
Director Sinella.
Yeah, water loss related, but not necessarily to this report, Chris, but thank you. A week or so ago, there was a hit and run that took out a fire hydrant on San Marcos Boulevard in Grand. And I know that we reported it to the sheriffs. Anything come from that investigation? Were they able to see anything on the cameras on the street lights or anything?
So we did file a report, but we haven't heard anything from the sheriff's department.
Okay. But we'll follow up at some point if we don't hear from them?
Yeah.
Director Hernandez.
Can you tell me how much time expenditure is involved in putting together this report?
Probably Mike Arthur would probably have the best answer on how much time he allocates to it. It's tedious.
I'm free.
He's done now, but.
Yeah, but hours, days, weeks, months?
To get all the data, 10 out, just 10 to 12 hours. So I already have the data every month. So I already do it in my normal course of work. So it's just compiling all that data from a monthly basis to an annual basis, changing it from fiscal year to calendar year, and working with, Ed. He gets a lot of the data and things like that.
All right. So not terrible. Okay.
And
We get reimbursed from the state for that time, right?
Director Elefant.
Yeah, maybe you can talk a little bit about water loss as a percentage and kind of what are industry standards.
So for our specific value, I think the one you're thinking about is the non-revenue water there, the 780, which looks to be about, I think, 5%.
Yeah, I think it's in the report.
Industry standard, it depends on where you are. A lot of times in the East Coast and older cities, it can be really bad. I think Ed may have a numeric value he may know.
American Water Works Association nationally, 5 to 10% is the typical average for water loss.
Yeah.
Around the world.
I think Philadelphia is one of the really, really bad cities that I've read about in the past where it goes well beyond that.
Thank you.
Well, see, no other questions. My sincere hope is that we continue Rob's validation training, and maybe we should have Mike do it next year, and that way we'd save Rob the problem. Mike could just self-validate.
I don't think they allow
They would
that.
not allow that.
Checks and balances.
You use a different name. Come on. Thank you very much. Thank you for your report.
Sure.
Note and file. Okay. Oh, we have a speaker. Thank you. Speaker, Mr. Hunsaker. Hold on 1 second, Chris, and please, just listen to the speaker. I'm sorry. My bad.
I read a couple of the advance notices on what they intend to do in the state on the question of water loss. And one of the statements that was in there is that its previous studies, back in the 2010s and things like before then, was that the average single-family dwelling lost about 20 gallons per day to water losses. And the state was taking the position that that is going to be the standard unless there is evidence to the contrary. And they're also talking about fines against the whole district. So the question is, who's doing the leaking? And how do we control that? Since the drought, there has been a dramatic reduction in water loss by single-family dwellings. They have by far the most sensitive meters, something like 30 times, more than 30 times more sensitive than your 2-inch apartment dwellings. And of course, it's very easy to determine whether or not someone has got a leak that they aren't fixing with computerized readout systems. The question is that there's very little leakage and from the single-family dwellings because they get billed every month and they can get warned and fix things readily. Apartments cannot. You do not have access to the meters, internal meters. And if they have water losses, some of these nonprofits, for example, charge an administrative fee on water losses and water. So those water losses will go unmeasured under the present sort of regimes that are being set up by the state, which puts a lot more burden on the people who are the most responsible and the most conservative and the least leaky elements of the district. After all, we're almost entirely a suburban district with a lot of single-family dwellings. So this needs to be watched very carefully, and the use of master meters in new developments is not something to emulate.
Thank you. Now we need, it's an action item, right? We need to vote. Need a motion and a second.
Move to approve the report as presented by staff.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you. Item 2.2, end of FYI 1819 capital project summary.
Yeah, so every year we come before the board and give the board an update on our capital project progress that happened in the preceding fiscal year. And I'm going to turn it over to James and Ryan to do that.
Thank you, President Martin, Board of Directors. I'm going to start today just by navigating and highlighting a feature on our website that's readily available to the public and any user to monitor our status of projects. If you come here to departments, come down to engineering, click engineering, go to the cog on the wheel, capital facilities, click this cog, and active capital improvement projects here will take you to an interactive map. Yes, and you can expand the map. All these different thumbnails represent different projects, either in design or construction. And this map and the information inside of it is updated on a quarterly basis. This has been available on our website for 6 or 7 years. We just don't believe a whole lot of people know about it. As an example, I'll come here to Rock Springs Sewer. If you were to click on this thumbnail, it'll bring up a brief description of the project. You can click on a link just below the description to take you to a full page of more in-depth description, financials, change order tracking, schedule, outstanding issues on the project. And this gets updated on a quarterly basis. This map is available on our website, and it's a really useful tool to all of our customers and whoever is interested in tracking these projects. And with that, I'm going to present the capital end-of-year update for fiscal year 18-19 and fourth. Yes, sir.
I just have a question on this before you leave it. Do we have a way of counting how many hits this gets other than internally? Because I'm sure internally you guys hit it all the time, but I'm just curious as to how much the general public is concerned and curious about all this.
Yeah,
It's great that we do it, I'm just wondering.
So we can track all that data. We can track total hits and we can subtract out the internal hits. It's a very low number of external hits. I don't have a specific data to give to you, but I have talked with our IT department, and it is not a lot of traffic that gets to this site. But we can separate out.
Okay, just be interested to know.
Yeah, maybe in future reports, we can include that information.
Okay.
I can follow up with IT. So I'm going to provide the update on capital projects, end-of-year update for fiscal year 18-19, and also the fourth quarter update. This presentation is typically provided a little bit earlier in the year than right now, but with cap fees, it got extended to today. I'm going to cover the end-of-year project summary and also the fourth quarter quarterly report. For the year, in tracking in total, we had a contract total of nearly $4.3 million of total contract amount of CIP jobs. Stretched out over all the projects, we had a total of 32 change orders to date through the year, totaling just over $65,000. That equates to a 1.5% change order adjustment, which would take the total project to nearly 4.35 million. I believe this is an old version, but I wanted to just clear that up real quick. Under design and design contracts, consulting contracts, the total contract amount for the year was $2.26 million. And that is all summarized here. Looking at the cash flow analysis through the year, the actual versus the projected monthly expenditures, shown here by the yellow and blue trend lines. The projected just ended up a little bit ahead of the actual early on in the year. The beginning and the end points are the same. It's just to show the cash flow throughout the year. Sorry. Looking at historical breakdown of fiscal years going back to 06, 07, we track these metrics every year. And just to give you a summary of an average year throughout this time period, we have contract totals of 5.6 million and an average change order percentage of 5%. Based on all the contract total values, $73.4 million over this time period. That 5% value equates to a $3.7 million contract adjustment for your change orders. If we compare this to the industry average of around 15% change order value, instead of 3.7 million, we'd be looking at roughly $11 million. And the difference there is 7.24 million, which is a rough estimate of the savings there if we were operating at closer to the industry standard of 15%.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
Go back to the slide. Out of curiosity, 14-15 is showing a minus 44% in change orders. Is that what that says? Or am I reading that wrong?
It's minus 4%.
Oh, minus 4%.
Yeah, minus 4%.
Better. 16, 17?
Oh, sorry, minus 0.4, it's 0.44%, sorry. 13, 14 was minus 4.
Never mind. Good job.
Again, looking individually at these projects, we track these metrics for every individual project throughout all fiscal years. The topmost being 18, 19 there. And these are the projects that were actually completed within the fiscal year and filed NOCs. So we track all these projects on an individual basis as well. And just to cover some projects that are ongoing, nearly complete, which started in 1819 and are almost at the point of completion. Rock Springs sewer replacement. I just wanted to highlight the sewer trench and installation work on the left in the roadway, and on the right in the existing green belt of a HOA.
Guys, before you
Yes, sir.
before you move on from
Sure,
that project, I know this is one that kind of cuts right through that neighborhood and impacts some of their open space and kind of their little kind of green belt area, if you will. I haven't heard any feedback, good or bad, so I assume no news is good news, but has the district heard anything from the residents there?
No, actually, I mean, we've had a few complaints during construction, but the next picture will kind of show you how we left the site. And I think you can see why they've been fairly happy with us.
We are very near completion on this. We've performed final walkthroughs. The same roadway on the left with final slurry seal. Very nice product in the end there for local residents. And then on the right is that same green belt with the new concrete pathway. What you don't see here is the strengthening of the sod areas where they performed surface restoration. They strengthen it so our heavy machinery, our Vector trucks can actually navigate up to our facilities here without destroying the turf. So that's a new feature. We have accessibility now.
Great job.
Is the gully in that picture, is that a cement-based gully where the water is?
Yeah, that's the original gully that was there. Matter of fact, we weren't allowed to touch that gully because, and Rob, correct me if I get this wrong, that gully is considered waters of the U.S.
Fancy.
Blue line stream, yeah, it's a blue line stream.
Another project nearing completion is Palos Vista Pump Station electric generator. You can see the generator being placed on the pad in these photos. This project is nearing completion. And the schoolhouse tank refurbishment, you can see some of the surface corrosion on the rafters on the picture on the left, and just performing sandblasting and coating work inside the tanks to refurbish that tank. And with that, I'll field any questions you may have.
Director Lithart?
Yeah, I think you mentioned we had, in this past year, was it 2.2 million in design contracts? Was that right?
Yeah, so that's a cumulative of what we have on the books, and if you go back.
Was that expended in just the past year?
No,
Oh, okay.
that's kind of a
I was
rolling.
going to say, there must be some really big
Yeah.
projects coming up.
One thing I didn't mention is that paid to date on that value, we're at 80% complete. So currently, we are approaching bid and construction phase on many of these projects, which I can attest is absolutely true.
So how much of that design work was actually expended in this past year?
I don't have that metrics on hand, but majority of it is really the San Marcos Interceptor project. And so of that 1.8 million, I think that's almost, that total fee is $500,000. But that project's been over several years. So a lot of these projects are over several, so Rock Springs is in here along with all the other design jobs that we've done recently.
Thank you.
If you go back to the water tank schoolhouse, I've noticed the last couple of projects we've had where there have been tank involved. When we get in there, we find more damage than we thought because of inferior products that we have to use because of EPA standards, I assume. Have we re-looked at our pricing going forward when we think we're going to need something, where we added money to it, so we're not surprised in the future?
This particular project, a lot of the rafters on the roof were corroded to an extent that wasn't understood early on. Once the tank was drained and the contractor was able to properly inspect the entire inside of the tank, these spots of additional corrosion popped up, which was the main driver of the overages on this one. We are taking steps in future tank rehabilitation jobs to do a more thorough and adequate condition assessment prior to construction to identify locations that may be more severely corroded.
Great, thank you. No other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Note and file, information only. 2.3, Aqua election of officers. We have our Aqua conference coming up, and one person that would be attending the Aqua conference needs to be the voting delegate. And who would like to be that? Please don't all volunteer at once.
I won't be attending, so.
I will be attending, so I will take up the charge.
All right. Jim Hernandez will be our delegate.
I'll take no extra pay for that as well.
And if I can add, so the Aqua Nominating Committee has put forth 2 candidates, one for president, one for vice president. Their nominee for vice president is Steve Lamar. He's the current vice president. And for vice president, they're putting up current Region 5 Vice Chair Sarah Palmer for vice president. So
Do we know
if the
any
board
of
wants to have any discussion about those candidates.
In passing.
I'm familiar with Steve Lamar. He's been a major advocate for legislative issues back in Washington, D.C.
Oh, good. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Move to approve.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you for voting electronically.
No, I was putting my microphone on.
Oh,
I wanted my eye to be heard.
all right. General Manager's report.
Just 2 quick ones. We just want to announce some upcoming night work. There's going to be some night work tonight on La Bonita Drive. That's in Lake San Marcos. That's to replace a water valve. The reason we're doing it as night work is because it services a dentist's office and we'd have to shut off the water temporarily, so we're doing that at night. Next Wednesday, we're going to be replacing a valve for an existing fire service to the Bolero bowling alley. That's along San Marcos Boulevard, and the city requires night work for work along San Marcos Boulevard. So just some tonight, some next Wednesday. Just want the board and the public to know that we'll be out there in the streets. That's all I have.
Has anyone been in that Bolero bowling alley lately? I'm just curious, have there been a lot of changes in it? They've done a nice job on the outside of the building. I don't know if they did the same on the inside or not.
Yeah, it looks really good on the inside. It's
Really?
it's a really nice bowling alley.
Okay, thanks. District Legal Counsel.
Yes. There was a new act passed regarding surplus properties. And it's really robust and was intended to close some gaps on the prior law relative to whether the law applied to all local agencies. And so this law makes it clear that it applies to all local agencies in California. It also extends the coverage from not only the sale, but the lease of property. The whole purpose of the law is to make property available for affordable housing, et cetera. So there's fines for violations of the act, et cetera. So anything going forward in the future where we were looking at using our properties or declaring it surplus, this new act would apply. Does not apply to the property we're currently moving forward with at this point.
Oh, great. Thank you. San Diego County Water Authority, no report. Encino Wastewater Authority, CIP Committee?
Yes, we had our annual update of our projects. The outfall, they had some repair on the outfall across Encina Avenida, 72-inch pipe that got taken care of. The primary effluent conveyance, got that continuing and 95% complete. The cogeneration building, that's the building with the wall that's rotten away. They're working on the design of the shoring, which is a big deal because it's an essential part of the facility. If something were to happen, we'd be in trouble. And then I think that was the last of the report.
I have one question on the shoring, because it
Yeah.
came up in my committee, and I didn't ask. The shoring they're putting in place, if it's not obtrusive, wouldn't it behoove them, they're paying a lot of money to have it put in there, to leave it there? Even after it's, because it doesn't seem to be, I mean, it's just beams.
Yeah, but
Does it hurt anything to leave
it would be redundant, because they're gonna replace the wall to better than what it was, because now
Sure.
it's gonna be a solid wall as opposed to masonry wall, complete with steel and beams and everything. So I don't think that, nobody would do that on purpose.
All right. You're already paying for it, why take
Yeah.
it down? And you gotta pay for them to take it down, too.
Well, yes, I think the shoring equipment is a rental usually, in my experience, so you don't need that continuing cost.
Okay. You want to move on while you're there to your report on Encina's meeting yesterday? Workshop, thank you. Looking for that word, I couldn't find it
Yeah,
anywhere.
but if,
No matter where I
whatever
looked.
the president wants. We had a workshop yesterday, a couple of items, one of which I was able to participate on, which was the south parcel, which I have heard about since I've been on the board for 10 years. It's been up and down and projects and housing and education centers and gardens and Jewish homeless facility, just everything from A to Z. Well, we finally set some parameters, the board did, and they came back, sent out 5,800 pieces of information on the commercial multiple listing site, got 45 back, talked to 8 people, they got 2 proposals, 3 actually. The third one we dismissed. Galaxy Soccer Club wanted to put soccer fields on it. We said, no thank you. But the 2 proposals they got were very exciting. One was an acre for BMW to store cars on. We're looking into that. And the second one, which was very exciting, was 2 acres of a battery storage company. They have batteries, large container-sized batteries, that they draw power off the grid during low periods and then sell it back to the grid at high periods. The catch, if you will, are 2. One, they're gonna spend more than $1 million to find out if it's viable. I mean, they gotta do all kinds of line studies, this, that, and the other. And then the second is a coastal commission permit that they must attain, which is time consuming, and a conditional use permit from the city, which I think is, they said 4 months. I've never seen one done that quickly. But at the workshop, we all agreed to go forward with the negotiations because there were a number of questions asked, who it is, are we gonna be compensated during the negotiating period? You know, what's all this about? But there's enough money gonna be generated from that to pay for half of our future dryers. So it's a substantial kick. So it's very exciting, and I let Hal talk about the biosolids.
Yeah, what I do want to bring up though, which I think is an interesting part and parcel of it all, is that of the acreage that's there, this use that Jim was just speaking about, storage, only wants 2 acres. And that's all they need is 2 acres worth of land to put their large battery storage. They look like container trucks, the bag of containers, and they'll set maybe 20 of them up on 2 acres of land. And as he said, which I found interesting, they take power off the grid at minimum time and then put it back on the grid at maximum time. And I'm going, why doesn't SDG&E do that? I mean, I don't know whether they'll do it themselves, but apparently it pays quite a bit of money because I think it was $80,000 a month
Yeah.
is the lease for 2 acres of property, which far surpasses the auto agency's $5,000 a month for 1 acre. But we have plenty of property there to do both. And actually to allow each one of them to expand, even when you put the footprint of what we may be using it for in the future. So very good uses, both of them, I thought. But yeah, the board asked some interesting questions. What type of automobile? Yeah, that was Encinitas. That was very concerning to them as to what type of, I'm sure they didn't want any Fords or
President?
Chevys. Yes.
In lieu of what the general counsel said, does the agency have to concern themselves? I mean, they certainly have done as broad a broadcast as anyone would expect on the leasing opportunity, but I'm sure Copio and the other guys are as well aware of what you were mentioning as we are. But
They would have to comply with the surplus property law.
we should probably make sure they've done that.
Yeah, I'm sure.
All right.
The second item that Jim recused himself on was how we're gonna look at dryers, more dryers, is it necessary for more dryers or not? When, if, how, a lot of questions. So the idea is that they started a study on it, continue the study till next year, not in the budget, do anything this year, and then put that into the budget next year and see if that pans out. And if it does, to continue looking at that, which is interesting, to say the least. That's all I have. So, standing committee, finance.
Meeting on the 29th. I don't think we met last month. I tried to get one until last second, and I think it didn't work out.
We didn't have one last month.
Yeah. Scheduling issues.
Director Martin, or President Martin, did you want to talk about the Policy and Finance Committee meeting that you had at EWA? Or no?
At Encina.
Yeah, I didn't bring that with
Okay,
me.
I apologize. I didn't know if you.
No,
just-
that's okay. I'm just trying to think, what was it? You remember, because we talked about it.
Yeah. Let me bring it up. Go ahead.
Okay. Standing committee, Jim, you have a standing committee?
Ad hoc committee we had.
Oh,
this
ad hoc.
month.
Yeah, do you want to report on the ad hoc?
Yes, I'd be
You
happy
certainly
to.
can. Go right
Our
ahead.
consultant, our fine consultant happens to be in the audience, doing a wonderful job for us. Identified that we do have a little bit of property mitigation that we're going to have to deal with. Nothing earth-shaking, no Sierra frogs or gnatcatchers or spotted lizards. But I'm sure we have sage. But fortunately, the ratio is very acceptable. Like, I think it's 2 for 1, so it's not outrageous. One of the things that we're going to have to bring up and discuss as a board is what our next steps are going to be, because there are a number of steps that we could take to benefit the district, the risk reward, if you will, on expenditures. Numbers were discussed that we could spend anywhere from $70,000 to $100,000 and do all the entitlements ourselves, Vallecitos. And then we could then produce a document where in fact we would do an RFP to find a partner and get the most bang for our buck. Or we could just say, thank you very much, developers out there, you do it, and give us a penny on the pound and move on. So I think we need to agendaize this item and have a larger discussion so that we can ferret out which way we want to go. And if we could do that in the next meeting or two, then we could, everybody will be here and we can set a path.
Director Sanella?
And I assume that will include some presentation as to what you guys have come up with to date?
Oh, no, this is all in the dark. Where are you going to know? Yes,
Okay.
of course.
Super.
Yeah, there's nothing secret about it. We're doing a great job moving along as quickly as we can, and our consultant's doing a great job. But just to add on to what Jim just said, we want to be careful as to spending money on it unless we see a reward. And there seems to be a pretty good reward in us getting all of the approvals. We can market the land for quite a bit more money than letting the developer do the approvals. I mean, it's like fivefold. I mean, it's a huge difference. So, yeah, we'll look at that in the future. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions on that?
Oh, and the Water Academy. We had the Water Academy
Oh,
this
yes.
week, yes. A new group, well, not a new group, but a younger group seemed to have showed up. We may have scoured the senior citizen parks, and now we're getting some younger folks. By the younger, I mean
Yeah, you consider younger.
55 mean average, I think, 60 maybe. But very interesting, and I was so happy to see our parting gift on Pardo was a plastic water bottle to reuse. So we're moving ahead smartly with being, yeah, well, paper would have been a little bit soggy, but this could be a reusable container. That was all.
Okay, I also attended that, and I thought it was really, really good. I actually stayed for our general manager's part, which he talked numbers to people, and why we have that, we call it the Vallecitos jail over there, easy to get out of. But showing people what's what. He calls it by the numbers.
One unit.
Not sure by the numbers. Yeah, and he goes through it, which is, I think, very appealing to some people. Sometimes you get too deep in the, you didn't, but sometimes you can get too deep into the numbers that people are lost. But you made it, simplified it, did exactly what they needed to know, I thought. So for people that were here are very happy. I noticed there was only 25 or 30 that I counted.
Yep, 26 showed up, yeah.
26 plus 5. 5 of them were retreads?
No, the 26 included the 5
Okay.
repeat offenders.
Yeah, so again, during the week, people work, so you're not going to get those under 55 or many of them. Although there are a couple, under 55, but yeah, so it's great. Okay. Any other directors' reports on meetings, conferences, seminars attended? Yes, sir, Mr. Sinaloa.
Pull up my information. So yesterday I attended the Council of Water Utilities meeting. I think I was the only one of us to be there, and I know that because I saved you guys seats, and it was a little awkward, but.
Oh, you were told?
Luckily it was a full room, which at first added to the awkwardness, but it filled in.
Big buffer.
But it was a good meeting, and you guys go often, so you know kind of what it's all about. But yesterday was, our presentation was by Jennifer Pierre, who's the general manager of the state water contractors. And she gave about a 20 or 30-minute presentation, kind of just overview of the Delta management, Delta smelt latest and issues, and all that stuff that's going on up there in Northern California. So it was informative.
Okay. Thank you very much. Director's report, quarterly board expenses are in the packet. Director's comments, future agenda items.
Mr. President.
Director Hernandez.
I would like to have the future use of the LS1 property. That's the Lift Station 1 property, 2.5 acres. We've got some good things proposed with solar, but particularly after this meeting at the Encina, I don't personally want to do anything that's going to jeopardize even a better revenue stream for our ratepayers. So I'd like
you'd like to agendize that in a future meeting?
No, we can't do it at a meeting, it has to be on the board.
No, I meant at a board meeting.
Oh, board meeting, yes, board meeting, yeah.
Okay, but we need to hear, we've already commissioned a study on it, so can we hear that first?
Well, actually, the study that we have commissioned was for solar.
Yeah.
And
Is that
happens to
property
be,
included in it?
yes, it is.
Well, should we hear that?
Well, we're going to hear it, I don't know what the time frame of that solar study is going to be, but.
So we anticipate bringing the solar item to the board at the next board meeting on November 6th.
Because that has to be acted on pretty quickly.
It does, because if we want to pursue that deal with the solar company, the prices that they're quoting rely on them getting a full 30% tax credit on the construction. If it delays it into next year, then they drop down to, I think it's a 20% tax credit, so they'll
Makes a big
probably
difference.
charge more for the electricity.
Right, so it's imperative that we do these at next meeting, so we have a discussion, we make as I say, we don't want to trip ourselves doing one thing versus doing both things.
Well, I think we actually went forward with coming back with this information. So we need that information to come back to us before we decide if we want to look at anything else on that property. I guess I'm just trying to say the train needs to continue going. We're not stopping the train because of a bright idea.
No,
Does that
I
make
think,
sense?
if I heard correctly, we're going to hear what the study says about solar,
There you go.
yeah, at next meeting.
At the same meeting, we're going to discuss
But you're not just going
station
to hear.
number one property.
You're not going to just hear the status. We're going to be looking for action from the board to enter into an agreement with the power purchase provider.
Right.
Well, then I would request on the agenda that we have a discussion of the LS property first. So we get all the information, then we can make an informative decision on the solar portion of the LS1 property.
We could probably incorporate into the solar discussion a description of the property, how much of the property would be taken up by the solar arrays, how much remaining property there would be after that is done. I don't know that it needs to be a separate agendized item.
Oh, then if they're together, fine.
James?
No, we definitely can. We'll have a figure that shows the property, but just so the board's aware, the solar array takes up a majority of the open space of the property. That there's a channel, a drainage channel in the back.
Right.
But the majority of the flat space above the drainage channel is taken up by the solar array.
And part of that array includes the future movement of Lift Station 1, if I remember correctly?
No, it doesn't.
That would be quite an expense.
Well, no, not the moving of it, but just the allocation of proper area. So if we do well, I don't know if this is the time for the discussion.
No.
All right, at the next agenda
We just
meeting, we'll
asked.
figure that all out.
All right. That's done. Last thing to do, 5:52 for all those that are counting, adjourned.